Yeah. Okay, so now...
So Riccarton Racecourse,
Just taking you to the changes sheet, that's the small table.
Yep.
Page 3.
Did Vicky have anything to say about this?
so Riccarton Racecourse is about 38 hectares is the residual.
Look, the two councillors aren't here,
Oh,
so
okay.
we'll do it on Wednesday.
Do that
Yep,
one, okay.
yep.
Okay.
Well, we're actually going to have to find another couple of hours, Brigitte, and I'll talk to you separately about that. We'll find a time and hold a separate meeting. No, I don't think people want to use tomorrow morning. Yeah, there's a whole lot of things that, yeah, it's not ideal, but various things got put in people's diaries that just can't shift. All right, so how are we going? Which is next?
Well, the future urban development areas, to be clear, that it's proposed that they are zoned as residential new neighbourhoods.
Yeah. Yep.
So that recommendation that you've just passed is accepting that, as it currently reads, with the exception.
So,
Yeah.
so to be clear, that means to rezone all the the future urban development areas to residential new neighbourhoods. And
Sorry,
also,
I've
So that's
turned
on the
over a
bottom of
page
page
and I've now
109.
lost myself completely.
Page 109 of the
Yep.
spiral bound.
Okay, yep.
That talks about, the very bottom of it, talks about future urban development areas.
Yeah.
What we're suggesting is that all of those areas on the right that
Yep.
were going to be part of a future urban development zone now simply be rezoned immediately as this
residential new
new
neighbourhoods.
neighbourhood zone.
Yep.
Oh, I don't have that information.
Some thousands.
Currently, and we're rezoning another.
Okay. The issue here is whether they are already signalled for development.
Yep.
They already have geotechnical advice, all the technical assessments. There is certainty that they will be able to be serviced by public infrastructure within 20 years. They're identified as what they are needed to 2028 or beyond, or slightly beyond. So the reason they were held back from being zoned was, they weren't probably as far forward as a lot of the living G zones or some of the more, so they were sort of kept in this future urban development based on, I suppose, long-term infrastructure provision. But, infrastructure programs do change. Even when you remodel these areas, when they do the wastewater remodelling, they find capacity. That as grounds to, stop them from being, zoned residential new neighbourhoods is not considered, strong enough grounds to, not enable them to be developed, or it's at least the act of rezoning them. So if they're ready to go be rezoned, we see there should be rezoned.
The two questions I have on this are, one, what impact does this have on people coming to live in the central city? And two, given our financial situation, I would have thought there's a huge uncertainty about the infrastructure. In fact, one of the things we're doing is reviewing our infrastructure spend because we simply can't afford it. So how on earth can we afford to commit to point 4, which is providing the development, new and required improvements to public infrastructure?
Okay, these are already identified greenfield priority areas that have already been stated as being required to meet the household targets for 2028 and beyond. It will be beyond as well. The issue is
it's our decision around the capital works program.
That's
It's
right.
our decision around the long-term plan. after consultation with our community. So we're out there seeking views at the moment as to what our priorities ought to be. And there will be people that think we ought to put priority into making sure that land use is available. And, by zoning it, it means that the decision isn't made that we are going to provide the infrastructure for it, but it's, when it's we're going to have to make that decision associated with when that development's going to occur.
Can I just ask, the point of today's meeting is not to
I know.
go over what we've actually already agreed to.
I've really tried, and I know I'm not doing a very good job, but
the staff's recommendation is to move forward.
yeah.
Simple as that.
This is a new recommendation that staff are putting forward that they want us to discuss.
Yep. And the recommendation is that we go straight to zoning them rather than creating a future urban development zone. And it makes absolute sense to do that now, rather than create a future urban development zone, which gets activated as a residential zone at some stage in the future.
Probably through a plan change.
Probably through a plan change. So let's just do it in one fell swoop. Right.
Moving on.
But in contrary, sorry, just before we move off that, can I just obviously have my vote recorded against, and also just have a response in terms of our urban development strategy? My understanding is we have very clear targets around the percentage of greenfield versus brownfield development, and this will be contrary to that.
No, it won't. No, it is entirely within the context of the UDS and the
Within the timing.
the LURP. The Land Use Recovery Plan has got specific areas identified, and we are simply giving effect to that rather than
On a staged
planning
approach.
it. Yeah, we were going to do it in a staged approach. We're now going to, we're sort of getting out of the, we're zoning it.
Yes.
And it might actually stop a few arguments as to whether it's the zoning that's the problem or whether it's the various other causes. So we shall see. This is just one that you just want your vote recorded against. Is there anyone else that's kind of in that space? So if we just make a note that Yanni's, we'll have to get a full list from you, Yanni, about the ones that you're recording your vote against. Right, next.
So, in light of this approach to rezone all greenfield priority areas, just making, suggested we can make it clearer the fact that we're rezoning all of them as a policy approach to enable the land use development and really to provide the direction for the development and the review of council's long-term plan. And I've just included some words there because the point is that it isn't the act of zoning that leads to inefficient use of infrastructure. Right. It is the long-term plan. That is how you deal with efficient use of infrastructure.
Yeah.
So I wanted to make sure that that was clear. And all the other, they talk about it in the higher level objectives, that we're going to achieve efficient use of infrastructure, but there's no policy that actually says how you're going to do that. And how you do that is through the long-term plan. Yep. Just wanted to suggest that we can make that clearer.
Yep, no, that's good. Thank you.
10. Has that everything to do with those? So shall we go through different?
Yep, and you want to rename East Belfast as South East Belfast.
If it was just a duplication of name, it would be confusing.
Very good. And then we get to...
Awatea.
You did Awatea while I was away?
No, we haven't. So page 115.
Well, I think, again, that's in Vicky's... Isn't it? Isn't it Vicky and Jimmy? Yeah, we better leave that one.
So we want to do that one on Wednesday, okay? What about that? What's going on? We've done page 117. So the next one is page 108, recommendations 9 and 10.
118.
Recommendation 109 and 110, that seems straightforward. Yep. That's just straightforward.
Yep. And then review maps relating to the proposed Cranford Basin, but we've put that one off, haven't we?
So that's all for residential, apart from those ones that we're putting forward to another day, which is Rickland Racecourse and Awatea.
Okay, good.
So moving into
112, rural.
rural. So we'll start off
That first one looks pretty straightforward.
Yep.
And we've dealt with
We've dealt with yes.
113,
Yes.
so we're over
So we went over
to
114 on page
114 on
130.
page 130.
That's straightforward.
Yep, so that's just improving some definitions and clarity as highlighted by Minister's comments.
Yep.
Straightforward, fairly
Yep.
straightforward.
Recommendation 115.
You might want to go through this one.
Yeah, once again, it's connected to the fact that the Minister commented about the rural chapter being reconsidered in light of the strategic directions
Yep.
decision. And so as a result of that, as mentioned previously, I have undertaken a thorough review in response to those comments, removing, as mentioned, terminology, improving objectives and policies so they're a lot tighter, and just in terms of the original intention to add to strategic directions to make sure by removing those that we weren't missing out on anything. So largely that's the review of the chapter, just and improving cross-referencing errors, removing duplicate references to other chapters, and just basically having another good look at the chapter
Yep.
in relation to those comments.
Recommendation 116. This is the quarry zone. That was the
They were all comments specifically relating to quarrying. Once again,
So what did you
overall
want to
review, so we
raise?
did deal with some of those.
Permitted activity. So I thought we had a pretty good discussion about that previously, but that's now being amended to be a lot more permissive.
Sorry? What?
What page are you?
Just the page number.
133.
Oh, right, 143. So that's under recommend.
133. Just the 1, 2, 3, 4. Fourth kind of dash.
Oh, right, okay.
The activity status has changed.
Yeah, if you look at page 143 under recommendation 118, I've actually expanded on that discussion.
Sorry, 143, what?
Recommendation 118. So the Minister's commented about the fact that in the operative Banks Peninsula plan, there are a number of controlled activities. Some of those are being dealt with by the general rules chapters. So that essentially left plantation forestry over a hectare and a very complicated rule that allows a residential dwelling on basically a 1 hectare site. However, that dwelling can only get to be established on a small site where it has been created through a particular subdivision rule. And the original proposal that I brought to you previously was, because we're not at this point having controlled activities in the plan, it was elevated to restricted discretionary. However, in light of the Minister's comments, I reconsidered that and have reduced that to a permitted activity status. Now, this is only the land use aspect of it, so this is the ability to establish a residential dwelling on a site that is 1 hectare that has already gone through a subdivision process, which has a restricted discretionary activity status. So in other words, this dwelling cannot be established on a small site unless it's been created by subdivision. So in other words, we would have already had the best opportunity to deal with issues relating to the siting of a building, because they need to identify a building platform, protection of the balance of the land against any further subdivision. So in light of that, my recommendation was, well, why do we need to then create another consent process to deal with issues that actually we've already dealt with at subdivision and adequately dealt with at subdivision? So therefore, any dwelling would still need to meet height and reflectivity requirements as per just establishing a dwelling on a normal 40 hectare site. So that's the reasoning behind it. It achieves the exact same outcome
Yep.
as currently intended by the plan.
Yep.
That was the way that I read that, and for that reason I didn't have a concern about it, but since we're discussing the 143, page 143, 144 item in the context of the issue that Yanni raised, the one area of this that I did want some clarification on was the box on the right-hand side of page 144.
Sorry, we're jumping right ahead now, so unless we're saying that we're ticking off all of the ones before we get to 144.
Well, 143 was raised in the context
Yes, I know
of...
it was, but that was a jump ahead, based on explaining what was being raised, which was on page 133. So,
All right, well, I can save that till we get there, that's all right.
we're generally comfortable with the 133, page 134, page 135, 136, and then we come down to recommendation 116, and that goes over to 138, and that was pretty straightforward.
And that was related to previous
And that was
discussion
the
on quarrying.
quarrying.
Yeah, so all the provisions under that recommendation relate to quarrying.
We've done that.
And that will
was a-
take into account any decisions we made earlier.
Yes.
Yes.
And
So we're up to recommendation 117, page 142.
hang on. Page 142.
Yes.
Okay, so then we've got, recommendation 117. Then we've got the emergency services facility, that's all good. 118. So is this where we're getting to now? Was your point, Andrew?
Yeah, this is the one that I was wanting to refer to, and again, in the context of the discussion that we've already had about pages 133 and 134. In the 100 hectare example in the middle column, point B, that 100 hectare would have already gone through a subdivision. 1 hectare would become the residential lot, and the remaining 99 hectares would remain fully rural.
Well, yes.
Would remain in...
Would remain with a covenant on it to say no further subdivision or dwelling developed. It may also involve protection of any landscape features or biodiversity features as well. So, yes, it will be retained as in rural productive use.
Great. So that was the reason I was comfortable with the 133, 134 issue. But the question that I've got, in the right-hand column, you've got P7 residential activity. This is on page 144. The site containing the residential unit shall have a minimum net site area of either 40 hectares below the 160 metre contour, 100 hectares above the 160 metre contour, or 1 hectare where the site has been created under Rule 8.3.1.1. Now, does that indicate, and if it does, I'll be happy, that 1 hectare would then have at least 39 hectares alongside it that was covenanted in any case?
Yes.
Or could it be a subdivision of 1 hectare, residential title of 1 hectare, with a smaller than 39 hectare covenanted area by the side of it?
No. So your original comments on it are correct. So the intention is that this is about establishing a dwelling, so you can have it on 40 hectares or 100, and we're not going to require any further consents, or the 1 hectare site that's been created under the subdivision rule. So the intention of that is the dwellings being located on the 1 hectare site, so the balance will have been protected under that subdivision, so there's no question about establishing a dwelling on that balance.
And the balance below 160 metre contour would always be at least 39 hectares, and the balance above 160 metre contour would always be at least 99 hectares.
Yes, correct.
Great,
Yep.
in which case I'm happy with it. Thank you.
Right. Recommendation 119, straightforward. 120. We're
Oh, yes,
producing those newsletters, that's very good.
Yep.
They're all quite
They're all
straightforward.
fairly
Remove
straightforward.
appendices, yeah,
Removed anyway,
and sure. Duplication, that's all straightforward. Then we're on to open space.
Through you, Madam Chair, may I just request that we go back to the General Rules and Procedures chapter to deal with the noise rules, because we have here our expert who has had input into those rules, Stuart Camp, and he won't be here available at another time.
Okay, I'm just
So that means we would go back to...
nervous about time, so I think we're going to have to. Is there anything else that we'll do that? We'll do the noise ones, but is there anything else that we have to do today? Because
no, unless the only main critical one that you haven't done is the mail site, but we could do that on Wednesday.
we'll do that separately. So let's do
Okay.
the noise ones. What page?
From here, please.
What page, Brigitte?
What page? 54, page 54. So that starts at recommendation 24.
Yep.
25 and 26 are fairly straightforward.
Yes, I think 24 is very straightforward. This is 25. 25 is just tidying up some wording to make it a little clearer. It's not fundamentally changing anything. 26.
Why would you reduce noise attenuation at the source
Whereabouts are you?
and the frequency?
This is it at 25.
Yeah.
Noise attenuation at the source is essentially imposing imposing limitations on your level. It's sort of repeating the same thing, which is why we're proposing to take it out.
Okay. And what about the frequency?
The reason I've recommended taking out the word frequency is that from an acoustic point of view, it has two meanings. It can mean how often it happens. It can also mean whether it's bass or treble or low frequency or high frequency. So it's a really bad word to use in a noise rule. So I've proposed level, location and duration, which really from a technical point of view sums up all you need to know about noise.
I understand why you've taken out the word frequency, and it makes sense, but there needs to be something else in there. I've got, is it 160 noise complaints for one address?
Yep.
So it's the repetitive nature, repeated, so it's not the duration, but it's the number of complaints that drives people crazy, having to, deal with this noise every time. So,
But aren't they two different things? We're talking about a noisy activity, whereas you're talking about a party house.
I'm just talking about a noise that just is reoccurring, repeatedly, which drives people batty.
But I thought it was a property, a residential property or a temporary residential property.
It's a residential property, but
Yeah, but that's not what this rule's designed for. This
That's
rule's
right.
designed for noisy factories and noisy businesses, and actually while we're at it, Bunnings, where they put the loading zone
Right.
by the residential, even though that wasn't in the original agreement,
yeah.
and they drive people nuts
Indeed.
every Saturday
So-
afternoon.
So that's what I'm
Yeah.
saying. So
Yeah.
You know,
but
I think
two
there needs to be
different
some
mechanisms.
recognition of the we can't use the word frequency, but if the noise is happening, you know, repeatedly, it actually has a cumulative effect on someone over a time
I
period.
totally hear what you're saying, but I think the noise rules as they're written actually don't address parties. They don't address that stuff. That's dealt with on a more of a Section 16 basis. It's a nuisance problem, and you address that quite separately, not within these rules.
Yeah, these rules are about noisy activities.
Yeah.
So these rules are really about the sorts of things that you need a consent for.
Yeah.
You don't need a consent to hold a party at your house, therefore the noise rules don't cover.
Maybe that should be the rule we impose on them.
So could a
Maybe,
panel beater in a residential neighbourhood or adjacent to a residential neighbourhood?
We do have to work it out from a different
Yeah.
a different perspective. I mean, the thing is that, I mean, the only thing that I think, there is nothing about the policy that is objectionable in my view. It's just, it is the example that I gave of a noisy activity which wasn't going to be facing a residential development, and the change was made without any consultation with anyone, and as a result, you know, their amenities just destroyed every Saturday afternoon and
So,
Sunday now.
I would have thought time, and I might be wrong, but it was still important, especially, for example, in residential areas around supermarkets or where supermarkets are going to go in, and trucks arriving, you know, and then pushing the boundaries on that. That's sort of an ongoing complaint often.
Yes, I think it's fair to say though, if you look at this, this is a policy on what we're trying to achieve through the rules. The rules don't actually tell you how often you can do something. They don't tell you what time of day per se. They tell you how noisy you can be at various times of day. So they actually restrict the level of noise. They restrict the location that you can do it. They restrict the duration in terms of whether it's daytime or nighttime. The noise rules don't tell you that you can only do it 1 hour a day or 2 times a month, nor would they ever. In terms of putting a loading dock next to a residential area, you know, that's either going to meet the noise rules and be permitted with respect to noise, or you're going to need to go through a resource consent process.
Unfortunately, they breached their resource consent and nobody did anything about it.
Indeed.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's that example, and I'm fairly sure I know which one you're talking about.
Martian Road.
At Marshlands Road, which, yes, we're involved with. Not happy that I am involved with it, actually.
Oh, if you could fix it, it'd be great.
Yes.
They're my neighbours around there, remember? I live around there. Not next door, but
Right.
so I'm not conflicted in any way. No. I do shop there.
Right.
But I never use the loading zone area.
Yeah, indeed. But that is an example where it's actually a breach of consent conditions. That's not the fault of the noise rules that problem has occurred.
Yeah. Right. All right. Is that all?
I think on 25, that's probably all.
Anything else?
Well, just flicking through the rest of them. 26, again, it's cleaning up. I wasn't happy with where the how to use the rules section is supposed to be easy to understand, and in my view it was so complicated you couldn't understand the how to use the rules, therefore you're never going to understand the rules. So some of that wording sort of dropped in beyond me, it's just a clarification. 27 is to do with Littleton. The issue that arose there...
Did you deal with the Wigram airfield ones? Or did Vicky deal with them?
No, we haven't. We've put that aside.
You put that aside.
Right.
So that includes the... Oh, yeah. Okay, right. Thank you. Yep, sorry. I'm with you.
27, the concern here was that the noise rules that we've proposed for the Commercial Banks Peninsula zone is more stringent than what was previously there. It's not actually. Previously we had 2 different rules for the same zone. There was one rule that applied in the Littleton town centre the other rule that applied everywhere else. The rule I've proposed is actually slightly more lenient for everywhere else. It's more stringent for Littleton because the previous rule was actually nonsense. The previous rule, you could never ever have any residential accommodation of any description within the Littleton town centre if people actually produced the amount of noise they were allowed to. It was totally incompatible with hotels or apartments or residential. Secondly, the previous rule was such that nobody could ever make use of it anyway because it nominally allowed a lot of noise within the town centre, but because the town centre is so small, you're always restricted by the residential area around it. So the proposed rules, I believe, are much more appropriate for the way that Littleton town centre functions. But what I am proposing is an exemption on people noise in outdoor areas, which is something that we've recently implemented in the Christchurch central city, which really is much more enabling in terms of cafes and restaurants and the likes, which have previously had difficulty meeting the noise rules as soon as you put people outside. So this allows for people to be exempted from the noise rules during daytime hours. So that would be up to 10 o'clock at night. Uh, 28 is...
So this comes back in some ways to the comments I made around alcohol licensing for Littleton as well. So if I can just clarify, the proposal under officer reasons is more stringent than the current regime which is in Littleton at the moment.
Yes.
So it's more restrictive than the status quo.
Yes, it is.
Because, I mean, as someone who has lived in Littleton for many years and has run businesses in Littleton for many years, including the type of business you're referring to here, I'm not aware of huge problems with noise in Littleton. It seems as though we're possibly solving a problem that doesn't exist. And given that Littleton's future economic development may well be, and again, as identified in the Littleton Master Plan, may well be around hospitality and entertainment, including later night hospitality and entertainment, it may be that this is going to stand in the way of some things that otherwise might naturally happen here that would be supported by people who, after all, are residents that are living within, in some part, a mixed zone, so a mixed residential commercial zone which is different to zoning in the city, or people that are living in a residential zone knowing full well that they're within very easy earshot of a commercial zone which has got hospitality businesses in it.
Right.